Okay, welcome. My name is Paul Bessems. I'm going to stand here because the microphone is firm on the statue here. So I hope you will see this or that screen. I'm going to talk about a project we do from the Weconomics Foundation. It's called Code4Prosperity. It's a free and open development community for sustainable prosperity. My name is Paul Bessems, and I'm an author and researcher on the area of organization forms. So I'm not really ITer. Before you design an IT architecture, it's normally that you also design an organization form to do the work in or whatever. So I'm more on the area of organizational science. I wrote some books, 5 books myself and 3 books I was co-author. And the books deal about how do we organize our prosperity and what's the role of our work in that, and within the work, what's the role of IT. So we're now in a situation that we have a certain prosperity. And it's amazing that around 1800, the richest man in the world was the Englishman. He had a comparable prosperity as a Roman slave. So the first 1800 years, nothing really happened. And from 1800, our prosperity six-folded. And we did it with a certain machine, and still people are trying to turn on the buttons of that machine. We see it nowadays, printing money, low interest rates, creating jobs there are no need for. So that's turning on the wrong buttons. And I'm really curious about the question, how should a machine look like which is aimed at not producing more prosperity, but producing an affordable and sustainable prosperity. And today I'm going to talk with you about the role of IT in that new machine. So I'm not really going to talk about tools, because we like to choose between tools to maintain our garden, but we still don't know which garden we want. So you can choose between a rake and a shovel. That's good for this kind of garden. But what if you have a paved garden? So really, we first have to look at the organization design. And after that, what kind of IT do we need for that? So that's my subject today. What kind of organization design do we need for a more affordable and sustainable prosperity? So when you look at the situation I'm talking about, it's more about organizational design, the left side, and a little bit about ontology and taxonomy. And not much about data models or databases. That's really at the ending. First you have to question with what kind of prosperity we want to live. Do we want more prosperity or a better prosperity? That's a different thing. So what kind of prosperity do we want? What kind of work we need to do? How can we organize that work? And finally, what's the role of IT in organizing that work? So if you look at Code4Prosperity, the project I'm talking about, it's about developing a new IT architecture and software to cooperate in a better way between organizations. So when I advise companies, I'm normally this guy. I say, well, if you look at the 21st century, we are producing and consuming not physical but digital. But we use the same organization forms as in the 20th century. So that's the square wheels. A lot of knowledge workers still go to the company every day. So we organize the work of a knowledge worker within factories. So the kind of work and the kind of work organizations should fit, and they don't fit anymore. So we work with square wheels, and it's better to work with round wheels. And I'm the guy who's presenting some new round, better wheels. So what's the problem? What's the problem I want to solve, also with IT, in the project Code4Prosperity? This is Sophie. I don't think you know her. She's my daughter.
She was on the internet.
Yeah, well, I think a picture on Facebook, but nothing more than that. But she was born in August this year. And I heard some experts say children that are born now easily will become 120 years. Not a problem. So children that are born now will, with some luck or bad luck, defines the choices we make now influence the way that the children will live. So if you look at some pictures, babies that are born now will become 120 years. So they will die with some luck or some bad luck, you know, in 2134. How will the world look like in 2134? Well, there won't be no oil, no gas, maybe some coals. So all kinds of stuff we need in our prosperity machine are obsolete. So that's a big problem. So my daughter will live in a world without oil. And of course we say, well, there should be some renewable energy, but oil is also in medicine, in agriculture products, in plastics. Oil is everywhere. So we need to address the problem, and we need to solve the problem now before it's too late. And producing more products we don't need. Prime Minister Rutte said we'll have to buy that new car. We buy a new car, but a car is only used 4% of his time. So why should we buy more cars? Why shouldn't we use Uber better, or Airbnb? Why should we build new hotels when there are a lot of rooms available? Why? So my question is, how can IT development help to solve these kinds of problems? That's my theme for today. So we're in a transition. We're in a transition from more prosperity to an affordable and sustainable prosperity. The prosperity we have now, the welfare, is not affordable. Because the costs rise and we don't produce enough for that. So what's the consequence of that? Well, tasks we source out to the government, we have to do ourselves more and more. In Holland we call it, for instance, mantelzorg. But we are in the transition from a welfare state to a participation society. So people have to do more jobs themselves, which they contracted out to the government. Not only taking care of your elder people, but also taking care of your children, safety in your environment, renewable energies, all kinds of things that will cost time. And people have no time in their agenda. We're very busy emailing, looking up data, sharing data. So the key is to make the knowledge worker more productive. So if I make you more productive, let's say twice, you're finished at 12:30. So you produce the same and you earn the same. If you gain productivity, if you productivity doubles, you're finished at noon. The question is, what will you do with the surplus time, with the afternoon? And John Maynard Keynes, a famous economist, addressed this problem in 1930 in an article for my grandchildren. He asked himself, what do we have to do with our surplus time once we got productivity improvements? And still we didn't solve that problem. We don't know what to do with the surplus time. What we do is we look for more work till 5 o'clock. The question is, does that work add value? No, it doesn't. We are sending emails around. In Holland, for example, the estimation is that there are 94 billion euro is in the economy of fiscalists, accountants, legal advisors. So if you, for instance, look at jeans, to produce a jeans is 10 euro. The jeans in the shop costs 100 euro. So 90% of the jeans is the production of consumption, to generate consumption. In the United States, for instance, they say, there's some research on that area, that they spent $1,200 billion, miljard in Holland. That's our pension fund, total pension fund, 1,200 billion on products they don't need, they put in a closet or they throw away. So the efficient machine, which is aimed at producing more welfare, is producing products we don't need. So we're in a transition from more prosperity to a more sustainable prosperity. And what we need for that is surplus time. We need the afternoon free to do tasks the government is bringing back to the civilians. So how can we gain more productivity? And is that a real problem? Yes, it's a real problem. What is said is that the cost for our welfare, they rise. So cost for education, cost for healthcare, cost for safety. But our production doesn't increase enough. So the gap is broadening. And the last 30, 40 years, what we did is we printed cheap money to solve this problem. But in the real economy, this is the problem, that the costs increased and the productivity doesn't increase. So there are three possibilities to close this gap. The first one is work longer. That's what the government wants. 65, 67, 70, work longer. If you work longer, you produce more. Okay? The second solution is produce more children. So if you produce more children, more people can work, and the product. And the third option, as my option, is increased productivity. And that's the real solution, because the farmer and the factory worker, they 50-fold their productivity in 100, 150 years. But the knowledge worker, the information worker, I think all we're sitting here, who is sitting more than 50% of the time behind the computer, at the telephone, or in talk? Most of us. So we are information workers, and our productivity only doubled since 1970, since the computer came. Only doubled. That's not enough to solve this problem. The famous economist Robert Solow, a Nobel Prize winner, said we see computers everywhere except in the productivity statistics. So despite all your work, it doesn't lead to anything, because we don't gain productivity, our happiness doesn't increase. So we really have to look at the effectiveness of our work, not at the efficiency of coding or whatever, but effectivity of our work. Some statistics. It's from Holland. We see here the sector: primary, agriculture, secondary, factories. Most of the people in Holland, about 70%, work in knowledge workers. And if you look at the productivity gain, it's okay in agriculture, it's okay in industry, but it's not okay in the work we do. Question?
So you mentioned the productivity growth in money.
Yeah.
But I think, for instance, people are on Facebook and exchange emails. But I think people want to chat.
Yeah.
It makes them happy. So people chat more.
It makes them happy, you say?
Yes.
Yeah. But maybe on the question was Facebook, all kinds of things. Does it make us more happy because people chat more?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, on micro level maybe, but on macro level not. We measure in all kind of types the happiness of people. There's a happiness index, kind of GDP. Yeah. And on macroeconomic level, we don't gain happiness.
So even if you would not measure it in money but in happiness, then still IT underproduces.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a comment about that, because happiness is like more than IT. We also have like a very different, 50 years ago we have a lot of refugees in the Netherlands. It seems to produce a lot of happiness for some people. So that's maybe IT increases happiness, but other things decreases happiness. Taking the overall, like what you say.
Yeah.
I mean, this could be the case, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the same kind of question, but if you look at, for instance, Facebook, it won't give you surplus time, it will cost you time. Yeah. And it's aimed at buying products you really don't need.
So Facebook is also about communicating with people in Egypt.
Yeah, but the driver behind Facebook and Google is buying more stuff. It's 90% of Google is advertising. So, yeah, and that's a real problem, because we buy stuff we don't need, and we look at evolution. A predator won't catch a prey if he is hungry. But we produce stuff we don't need. So Apple says, I make stuff people didn't realize they wanted. Well, is that evolutionary seen healthy or not? But maybe we can address this question later on, happiness. So there's a, sorry?
We have to address, I think we should address the question, why are people buying stuff they don't need?
Yeah, it's an identical problem.
Occasional thing, and we consume more and more. It's,
Yeah.
It's not a good thing to have.
Yeah.
And it's hard to educate people to like be more, think before consuming.
Yeah. Can you address that question later on, education on this theme? Because I'm running out of time when I address the questions now, but save it for later. It's a good question. So the aim from my work is to see how can we decrease the gap between production and costs, especially on the information worker. This is okay. We don't need to do anything there. They are productive enough. So how do we decrease this gap? Well, you say we have Facebook, we have IT, we have big data, we have cloud computing. They must make us more productive.
Yeah, they do.
On micro level maybe, but not on macro level. You saw the statistics. Yeah? So what do we do at IT? We send an email to another station, another company. We look up the data. We need 30 to 40% of our time to search things we saved ourselves. And then we type over the answer to the next station. So we're really sending emails around. So the tools are okay. The IT tools are okay, but they are put in an old kind of organization form. So we let the IT worker, the knowledge worker, we put them in a factory with hierarchies, with a building, and we think that the best way to organize the work of knowledge workers is within companies. But our company's borders, and every company has its own IT system. So if you have to cooperate between companies, you have to send an email. It's not really sharing data, it's working. So this is what happens when you put real good tools in when you put a new soul in an old body, this is what happens. And that is what we do. So we have to design new organization forms for the knowledge worker. That's my message. So the time that we work in factories as a knowledge worker is over. We need to, and well, new forms are communities like Wikipedia or Linux. So we know how to do it, but still a lot of people work in companies. So we need new organizational design. So we have to go back to the drawing table, and what I said, it's not really an IT problem, it's an organization form problem. First we have to design a new organization form. When we work, you can choose between do it yourself or contracting out. So that's the two options we choose, do it yourself or contracting out. And what we need is a more hybrid form. That's what I'm going to talk about the hybrid form. One of the most important management thinkers of the 20th century was Peter Drucker. He mentioned this problem already in a famous article in 1999. He said the most important and truly unique contribution of management, but also of corporations in the 20th century was the 50-fold increase of productivity of the factory worker. We need to do the same in the 21st century with the knowledge worker. So the task to do is to increase the productivity of knowledge workers. Can we do that with the same forms, or do we need new organization forms? That's the question. Well, the answer is, I think we need new forms. Another famous thinker is Oliver Williamson, also a Nobel Prize winner. And I think he really understood what the problem is. When you look at organizational science, that's the people who design organizational forms. A corporation is an organization form. A guild is an organization form. A community is an organization form. So the people who design these forms, they're like two provinces. We have the economists and we have the socialists. sociologists like Weber. And he said the two people don't meet. So we have people who look at working in a firm, like Max Weber, and you have people who look at working via the market, like Oliver Williamson or Ronald Coase, for instance. So the question is, are companies and markets, that's how we work these days, are companies and markets, are that square wheels and do we need round wheels? And I'm going to focus on hybrid organizing, because hybrid organizing is a crossing between do-it-yourself and contracting out. And I want to elaborate on that, if that's a new good form to make the knowledge worker more productive. Yeah? So the question is, do we need an extra form between do-it-yourself via the firm or contracting out via the market? Ronald Coase wrote a very famous article in 1937, The Nature of the Firm. His question was, why do firms exist? Nowadays, for money you go to the bank, for work you go to a company, for healthcare you go to a government. That's how we think. But 40, 50 years ago, that's what was not obvious to go. So the main reason there are firms is that transaction costs are high. Transaction costs is, in Eindhoven we have Philips, they made all stuff themselves, glass, paper for the packaging, because contracting out on physical products is very expensive. You have to close a contract, you have to transport things, but now we work digital. So transaction costs are nearly zero between companies when you produce and consume data. It's nearly zero. So that's a fundamentally different situation. Maybe a little bit theoretical, but in practice we know the marriage. Marriage is very firm. You know what you get till you die. So the firm and the marriage are comparable. So the market is comparable to the one-night stand. You can change every evening from partner. And what some people want is living apart together or working apart together. So more a hybrid form between do-it-yourself and contracting out. So I'll go a little bit more in depth on that area. When you look at also IT architecture, but also on organizing things, there are two main drivers. You can bring back everything to the two main drivers. Not only are those the two main drivers in organizing our work, but also organizing cities and organizing nature. So nature, cities and companies, they follow the same main drivers. And the main drivers are scalability and flexibility. So when you look at nature, an elephant is simply a scaled-up hippo, and a hippo is simply a scaled-up horse, and a horse is a scaled-up human. Nature is aimed at scalability. So one cell of an elephant is 1,000 times more efficient than one cell of a mouse, for instance. Relatively, an elephant doesn't have to eat as much as a mouse. So nature is aimed at scalability. Because if you scale, you have less cost on infrastructure, for instance. When the city doubles in citizens, it has 50% less infrastructure. Gas stations, restaurants, whatever. So, and it's the same in companies. So, but the antagonist of scalability is flexibility. So big companies are not so flexible. So we have companies who are very scalable but not so flexible, and we have markets which are very flexible but not so scalable. And we need a crossing. We need a form that's scalable and flexible. But that's easy. We have the internet. The internet is very scalable. You can connect to everybody in the world if you want. So the internet is very scalable, and human is very flexible. So the new organization form should connect people via the internet. We think that's what we do, but not in our working area. We send emails, so that's not really cooperating or sharing knowledge. So what we need is a form that's scalable and flexible. So that's the direction we're aiming. And we call it hybrid organizations. So a firm is scalable but not so flexible. The market is flexible but not so scalable. And we need hybrid organizing that's unscalable and flexible. And within organizing hybrid organizations, we have a different unity of design. So a designer has a unity of thinking. When you're an architect building houses, the smallest building stone is brick. From that brick you build building. So what's the smallest building stone in firms? That's a firm. When you develop IT for a firm, the firm border is your border. So if you're an employee, you can go on the Outlook system, but if you're a flex worker, you can't. So if you're employee, you get a Christmas bonus, but if you're flex worker, not. So the border is the company border. In the market, it's a transaction. That's your unity of thinking. In hybrid organizations, the unity of thinking is organizing capability. What's organizing capability? Philips is an organization, and Philips has an organization. Has an organization is organizing capability. What is organizing capability? Me and my laptop, I am an organization because I have organizing capability. So an organization is built up of a human and a tool. So a human and a tool, that's already an organization. And from that smallest building stone, you can build up every organization you want by connecting. So a company is a group of connections between people, is employee of. So a city is a group of connections, is civilian of. So from the smallest building stone, a human and a mean, a human and a tool, you can build up every organization. So that's the core of hybrid organizing. Human and the tool is organizing capability. What do we need? Now I'm looking at IT. We only need to define the attributes of a human and the attributes of a mean. So there's a fundamental difference between a human and a mean. Human is born naked, and then you get a meaning. So existential is before essential things, and a meaning has to, a tool has to have a meaning. So, but we can do this in biology. In biology, we have done this with animals and plants. It's called an ontology and a taxonomy. Families, classes, and you write down a bird, color of wings, length. That's attributes. That's the only thing we need to do. And from that smallest building stone, we can build every organization, every citizen, the whole world. So what's organizing? Organizing is connecting and disconnecting. At time is 0. These are the smallest building stones, 3 people, and here 4 people working together with certain connections. On one week later, we have the same building stones, but we have different connections. You could see that as kind of project. Today we are working at project X, and in 1 week you are working on project Y, and that with different people. So organizing is connecting and disconnecting. And with this thinking, we can still organize old companies. From the smallest building stone, you can still organize these companies. I come to the community because I think the community working on shared network, whatever you can call it, is one of the practical forms we're going to work in the 21st century. And when you look at a community, it's a connection between people. But for a community, you need shared values. This today is a community, and you come here because you have shared values, thinking about open and free source development. But you also need, for instance, an infrastructure to connect people. So for a community, you need to have some things, and I wrote them down here. But if you have those things, you have a community. And of course, a corporation or a city is also a community. But building up from the smallest building stone is much more flexible. Think about Lego. We all know Lego. nowadays people work with building, how do you call it? You have a fire worker and a hospitality, and you have to make an airport with that. That's not easy, but if you look at the smallest building stone, you can build everything with Lego. So think from the smallest building stone, human and a tool. How is that in practice? What we did, for instance, in Holland in the HR market, we connect different kinds of companies on the same process. For instance, searching and booking of courses, trainings, events, whatever. So it's a community based on an important principle that people who produce data, like the price of a product or your day of birth, people who produce data only have to do that on one place, and people who search for data can work with an own portal or channel. So that's a basic fundamental, one place to maintain your own data, personal data, and a portal on the level of a company to search and do some transactions. So what's the problem if you want to buy a car of 20,000 euro? And for me it's not important which kind of car, but if I want to buy a car of 20,000 euro, I have to go to 10 different showrooms, because the producer says, well, this is how I do information to the customer. What I want is one showroom with cars of around 20,000 euro from different types in one showroom. So we think from the user point of view and not from the company point of view. How does it work? Well, if you look at the problem, for instance, also in recruitment, is that if you have a resume and you want to show that resume on LinkedIn, Monsterboard and Stepstone, you have to log on 3 different channels to do that. Yeah, so this is the situation now. When you want to show that you're available for a job, you have to go on different channels to put in the same data. So you and me, we are in 2,000 to 3,000 databases in Holland with the same data. Even a hermit, a guy who's not on the internet, is living alone in a house. Even hermits are in 200 to 300 databases in Holland with the same data. So what can we do about the problem? So this is the problem when you want to do recruitment. You have to log on different sites. The solution is that you say, well, I have one application to put in my personal data. It's sent to a shared information network, and from that information network it is sent to different channels. So that's what we're working on the Weconomics Foundation. Is that strange to do it this way? No, from an IT technical point of view, this is not a problem. It's an organization form problem, because all the organizations have their own databases. Question?
Is there time for questions?
Is it because we have some time afterwards for questions? Is it on this picture? Or? Yeah.
So suppose that we have this gedeeld informatienetwerk.
Yeah.
But of course there are transactions costs involved. There are people making contracts between LinkedIn, Stepstone and the information network and then the other side.
Yeah.
And now the time which is saved by this now is done informally. People in their houses, they're going to these websites, and it's not part of the economy.
No, but it's also not productive. I'm not really interested what's part of the economy, because it...
would it make IT more efficient if we would set up such a network?
Yeah, because instead of 3,000 databases, there's only one.
Yeah. Okay. So there's
in theory.
There's less time spent by humans solving this problem.
Yeah.
There's a different problem with that, because they have one database with all my data, and now I can choose to give some data to LinkedIn maybe, and some data to Facebook, and some data to WhatsApp.
Yeah.
They don't pool together, so they don't know everything about it.
I elaborate on this more. So save your question if it's not solved in the next pictures. Yeah. So this is the situation we did in the Weconomics Foundation, is to develop an infrastructure with a simple principle, putting data on one database for the guy who produces data, and an own channel for the guy who searches for the data. Is that strange? No, it's not strange. When you look at, for instance, the data grid, the power grid, we organize it that way. Because what does a TV do? A TV does transform power into images. A keyboard transforms power into music, and a blender transforms power into movement. We don't need different power connectors for different applications. So an application, a TV, a mixer, simply transforms power into something. So an application or an app should transform data into information. So first we have to organize the data, and afterwards we make apps to transform the data. So I want to focus on organizing the data, not on transforming the data, no, organizing the data. So how do we organize it now? We say, well, if this is in practice, well, we need for every device, we need a different power connector. It's not in practice, but when you look at IT, every application, SAP, Microsoft, etc., they use their own databases. In theory, yeah? Not always in practice. So what we want to do is say, well, can different applications use the same database? And I say database, but what I really mean is the same ontology and taxonomy. So what we want to do with the foundation is to say, well, we need a power grid. So we need the internet, not only the technical connection, the IP, etc., but we also need the data. Remember the picture, the human and the tool with 200 to 300 attributes. Those 200 to 300 attributes for human: day of birth, length, address. Those attributes we should put in one ontology, one taxonomy. And with that fundamental approach, we can use data to generate information for ourselves. So when you look at the power grid, we're not only consuming power as a human in a city. We have sun collectors on your roof. You're also producing. So we are consumers and producers. Let's call them prosumers. But it's also the same with data. You produce data, your own personal data, to the grid, and you consume data. So we can organize data on the same way we did it with power. Not the same, comparable. Okay, 5 minutes. So I'm aiming at using the same ontology for different applications. Facebook, LinkedIn, also for recruitment, of course. And within Weconomics, we have different domains, not only recruitment, also HR, expats, training and development, governments, all kinds of domains are on the same data grid. Some principles of that data grid. I think it's nice for an ITer when borders don't change. When you merge two companies, it's a hell of a job, I think, for ITers. So borders change all the way. But in our model, the smallest building stone is the human, and the biggest building is the world. And in between that, everything happens by connecting and disconnecting. So the borders don't change. You have the smallest building stone, and the building is the world. Some more principles in this infrastructure. Personal data in the cloud, obvious principle: profile, connect, collaborate. We see it on LinkedIn. I profile, you profile, we connect, and we can collaborate. So it's in one of my books, a lot of fundamentals for the new IT architecture. Okay. What we're working on in Weconomics, and then come to an ending, is kind of ecosystem that's built up from the core. That's the ontology, the taxonomy, and above is the application. So in the application you put in local differences, and in the core you put in similarities. When you look at data from organizations, 80 to 90% of the used data is the same. And still they have different databases, software, etc. It's the same in nature. If you look at an embryo of a salamander, a fish, a human, or a pig, they're 90% the same in DNA. So we focus on the differences, but we have more commonalities. Within Weconomics, we think from the commonality, start from the commonality. Which data do we have in common? Which process do we have in common? So a lot of software companies, they earn on the differences, but the differences are only 10%. And we have a company in Holland, KPMG, they say, well, the slogan is cutting through complexity. First I hope nobody from KPMG is here, but first they make companies complex, and after that they cut through complexity. That's how they earn money. So if we develop software not from the differences but from the commonalities, a lot of people won't have work. So that's a different problem. Okay, the project Code4Prosperity is a Weconomics Foundation project to improve the productivity of information workers and redistribute the surplus time. It's not only gaining productivity, and a lot of people think I have to work twice as hard. No, productivity is making the same, earning the same, and finish at 12:30. So what we want to do is in project is with IT development, improve the productivity of information workers with the grid I mentioned, with the data grid I mentioned. And I invite you to look at the website for this project. It's also in the conference paper. So we're looking at people, and it's free open software. What we want is to improve the cooperation between people who are working at different companies, different cities, etc. Okay, so final sheet is what is the Weconomics Foundation? I work for the foundation. I'm a consultant for my own, but I also work for the foundation. The Weconomics Foundation works with a concrete focus on strategy and operations to organize an affordable and eventually sustainable prosperity for all people. The point is, I think that with 20 to 30% of our time, we produce the same prosperity as we do now. 20 to 30% of our time. So what we really need to do is to think about the 60-70% of the time, what to do with that. So John Maynard Keynes addressed this problem already in 1930. We still didn't give an answer. Despite of big data, information overload. So we don't need more data, more information. We need wise thinking. We know the pyramid, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. There are 4 different things. We need wise people who say, well, is this it? Do we want to work and don't gain happiness or prosperity? So Weconomics is a trinity. It's an organization model. I talked about it today. Organization model with hybrid organizing. It's an infrastructure and it is a transition program. So we're really at the beginning of a transition from, let's say it's simple, a machine which is aimed at more prosperity to a machine that's aimed at affordable and sustainable prosperity. And for an affordable and sustainable prosperity, we need a different kind of machine, and we need a different role for IT. And I hope that's my aim for today, that you're going to think about the new role for IT in a new world in the 21st century. Is it the same as the 20th century, or is it a different role? Okay. Well, you want more information, I have some cards here. You can reach me via LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever.